Welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. My name is Mark, and I go by Mark Your Pages.
And I'm Jess, or Jashi Karen, and in today's episode, hopefully we don't get cancelled on the internet, we're going to be talking about Planner Icks, things that give us the heebie-jeebies, things that make us say, yeah, nah, not for me. Before we get into that though, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about creativity and planning, what creativity meant for you. It's always cool to see how our opinions on this kind of differ, and how certain areas of creativity that you guys put forward I hadn't even thought about. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, it's always very cool whenever we see that, the way we talk about it, what we share, our experiences, mean a lot to us, why we do what we do. But it is very cool hearing how the other Planner Pals utilize their time, their creativity, some that are more minimalistic, some that are maximalistic, if that's even a word. It's just fun. We're just having a good time here in the planner space. But sometimes when we don't have a good time, Jess, is when we come across planners that are gross, cringe, just not necessary, just things that were just like, why make those choices?
Yeah, certainly. It's always disappointing, especially when you find a planner or a notebook or whatever, and you're like, wow, this is absolutely brilliant. And then you just get to that one thing, the one thing that puts you off, and you're like, cool, so this isn't completely ruined for me now.
Yeah, so today we're going to break down this topic into kind of three main areas. We're going to talk about aesthetic icks, just things that you just look at it and go, no. We'll also talk about from brand and businesses and things like that, and especially in this planner space, kind of the icks and the cringe that we get from that. And we'll also just talk about functionality, that Jess and I both really fully enjoy functionality. And even though people try hard, sometimes it's just not that great. So Jess, I'm going to let you start today from an aesthetic standpoint. What's an ick that you get from some different planners?
Okay, we're going to start with one that feels super, super minimal to probably most people. But an aesthetic ick for me is when a notebook has sharp edges. I'm like, why are you trying to stab me? Calm down, kind of a thing. And sometimes, again, you have such beautiful notebook designs. I'm like, wow, this is great. And then the aggressive corners just get me. I'm like, yeah, no, I can't use this. You feel more like a book than you do a planner now for some reason. I don't know what it is.
That's interesting. I only have one notebook that has actual sharp edges, I guess you would call it. I always felt like it was a very fancy notebook. It's something about the sharp edges or the corners. I'm just like, oh, okay. You're not just a fun notebook planner. You're very serious about this. It's interesting that it seems very odd to be like, ew, no, corners, not rounded edges.
Same idea with the paper, though. It's even if sometimes you get a notebook where the corners of the cover around it, you're like, excellent, beautiful. And then you open it up and you're like, betrayal. They've got sharp edges on the paper. And I'm like, again, with trying to stab me. At least in that case, I can get out my corner rounder. I don't usually, but I could get out my corner rounder and round off every single corner. Punch, 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 getting my money's worth on that one. But I don't know. It's very much a personal preference. A lot of these are going to be personal preferences, but that one is one that just, What would be one of yours?
So one of mine, I will take it a step outside of the corners and talk about the material that the actual notebook is made out of. We were just talking about this earlier. Whenever I talk about notebooks and it's just like a linen cover, for instance, I think at first I was very drawn to those because they look very nice. But I despise when you look at your journal and all you see is just dark edges from where you touch the covers and all. And I feel like I'm a relatively clean person, but it just picks up everything on the table. It takes up everything on your hands. And by the time the notebooks are done, you're just like, ew. I don't even want to open. I'm embarrassed, honestly, by it. So a lot of the times when I'm done with a notebook and I put it on my shelf, when I have to go pick one to be like, oh, let's use this for a photo op, or let's go through this and flip through it, I quickly open the page. I'm like, do not look at how disgusting I am.
It's also even if you're not, like you said, you're not a messy person really, but it's just from the general being on the desk, picking up dust and whatever, and then the spine gets all grey, and you're like, oh, brother, I just don't like it. I mean, also with the linen covers, they are always the ones most at risk. I got a food stain on the back of one of my journals. I have no idea how, because I'm like, I don't really eat a lot of food at my desk. Certainly not whatever splotch I got on that. So I'm like, did you just make your way into the kitchen and fall into sauce? I don't know, but the stain is there.
Yeah, I had a chocolate chip cookie crumbles smashed into one of mine one time because I think I was eating cookies at my desk or something, and then I put my notebook down, and later on I like picked it up and I was like, "Ew, what is this?" And I was like scratching it off, and I was like, "What, Mark? What is your problem?" Never happens with any type of the buckram covers. Doesn't happen with the faux leather ones. It's just that. So I am somewhat weary of it now. It's a hard decision sometimes though, because like my last bullet journal was a square one and had a linen cover, and I loved it. And the last week of last year, I actually sat it down and I must have had water or a cup or something and put it on, and it left like this really gross looking watermark, but it was not just like a ring, it was like a splotch. And I was like, thank goodness I'm not using this notebook anymore because I could not survive it if it was any longer than like 2 weeks before we moved into the new one.
Yeah, no, that would not be great. I you see a lot of horror stories of people getting stuff on their covers like that. I think the thing with cover materials is that like linen probably isn't even my least favorite cover material. There is that particular type of faux leather that gets dents in it from the smallest things. And I don't know what like the actual official name of it is or anything like that, but it's literally I went to put one of my notebooks on my shelf. It ever so slightly clipped the corner of the shelf and now has like almost a rip in it. I'm like, how? Why? Who decided to pick such a flimsy material? You have no legs to stand on, friendo. How are you going to survive in a bag? It's not. It's not going in a bag. It's going to stay on the shelf and think about what it's done. But some of the faux leathers are like either really, really super soft, or they're the ones that like you open the notebook a couple of times, you're like, cool, the edges of my notebook are ripping. So bad.
It makes a big difference when we think a lot and we talk a lot about designs and what we like and the different patterns and stuff like that. But it really does make a difference. I think, some of the early notebooks I've talked about when I went on the super cheap side, and I don't think it mattered what kind of material it was. I think both of my early like R&D journals before I got my official one, they just fell apart. Like the whole just covers were like ripping off. And I was just like, I know that this is a cheap notebook, but like come the F on. And especially with some of them too, Archer and Olive has some that were like the velvet ones too. That's the same thing where like aesthetically it's very cool, but you just know that's just going to trap everything. It's like it's a everything trapper. I can't even imagine using one of those. I just have a lint roller. That's what I would put, a little mini lint roller where my pen holder would go, just so I could always just wipe it off if I used it.
You gotta keep it tidy. I know for some people in particular, it's not even so much that the velvet kind of covers catch dust. It's just like the actual tactile feel of it gives them the ick, the heebie-jeebies kind of a thing. I don't quite have that problem, but it's effectively like feels to them like two blocks of styrofoam rubbing against each other or like nails on a chalkboard. It's like the visceral feeling of that, but in notebook form. So that's not great either.
You never realize how dry your hands are until you tuck like a microfiber cloth and you're like, am I Spider-Man? Why is this sticking to me?
It would literally be like that. Just like hold your notebook up by putting your palm on it.
No, thank you. All right. Any other aesthetic icks that you can think of just for yourself?
I think when we get into the kind of like planner space specifically, one of the aesthetic icks would be just like poor choices in terms of like headers and lettering styles and such. One, having too many, because I'm just like, no, just stay uniform. Like, get your open sans out and we'll just use that because it's very neutral and everybody can vibe with it. Or two, when they just like make the sizings really weird and you're like, cool, to cover this up is now bloody nightmare. I don't want your weird serif font. Like, get out of here. It's not so much a problem for bullet journaling because oftentimes we're using like, dot grid, regular blank notebooks or whatnot. But in terms of like the actual planner space, font choice matters. Do better.
I think something else that is bothering me from like the inside perspective a lot of the times, and I don't mean this in like a bad way, but I've never really liked it because I feel like it's a waste of space, especially with like some of the Hobonichis and stuff like that when they have like all the quotes down the edge or like in different places. I know the one that I had, I thought it was a cool idea, but I was like, I could have done more with that space. It was like a flip book, that had a little fox on it, and as you flip through the pages, it like moved around. And I was like, okay, that's fun, but like you're putting all of this extra stuff around here. This is really supposed to be about writing things down and like having the space to do that. And so I always was just like, I don't want to use you because I feel like you're just wasting my space. Even though it wasn't like a ton, it was enough though where I was just like, unnecessary. I don't really need it. I would just rather go with a blank page if you have one.
Yeah, I think it's very like planner specific because if you're buying a planner that's supposed to be like, my motivational fitness journal or something like that, then yeah, having like motivational quotes and stuff throughout kind of makes sense, but done within reason, done with appropriate font choices, and just positioned properly. Because like if it's in the middle of what is going to be my functional space, no, get out, go sit on your own page. I'll have like a intro splash page for the month with the quote, but not on my weekly.
For sure. Sometimes you're just like, who designed this and why did you do it?
I think also one that gets to me for aesthetics is just like the cover and color options. Sometimes I'm just like, bro, why? There's one notebook I have, which is when people started to do kind of like the full cover designs and such, and people were getting very excited about it. And at a first look, I'm like, wow, this is really pretty. And then you have just a closer look and you're like, oh dear, oh no. Like some of the elements they included on that, in particular, it has a moon design and the moon craters are like massive compared to the actual moon itself, to the point where I'm just like, this looks more like a virus molecule thing rather than an actual moon kind of a choices were made. So I also just feel like sometimes with certain colors and covers and whatnot, you get a beautiful design with a trash color and you're like, great, that I didn't want puke green.
We were just talking about this before because I was asking Jess what she thought about the Arch and Olive Spring collection, and we were talking about some of the choice colors that were used inside of there too. And it's one of those things where, you know, companies are going to experiment, they're going to play. I know some people don't like a very vibrant notebook. I kind of teeter on that a little bit. I feel like it has to be the right kind of vibrant to, you know, if you want it to stand out, great. But then sometimes just like, I don't need you yelling at everybody, bro. Like, to simmer down now. But I think it is like those off colors sometimes where you're just like, oh, I write this really nice chocolatey brown, but then it like adds in a little ugly kind of colors. And for me, I'm color deficient. So, right, like things probably don't look the same to me as they look to you. Sometimes they look a lot more dull, honestly. So I'll be like, that looks like a diarrhea notebook. You know, like something about that brown, green, whatever, make me want to actually gag just thinking about it. You're just like, no, maybe that wasn't a great color. I'll stay away from that one. Especially if it has like texture on it or something else, you might as well just flush it down the toilet, honestly.
For the most part, most brands do a fairly good job of picking colors that are like okay. They're like, they've got enough mass appeal because, you know, they want to sell them and all of that kind of thing. But every so often you get like either a color or a color and design combo, and you're just like, bro, choices. The one in particular that came to mind with your like neon idea was when they did that holiday box that was like the messy neon Christmas and stuff.
I love that one.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're out there being like, this notebook is great. You probably see it slightly more dull than we do. And I'm just like, my eyes, it blinds me.
Yeah, I thought that one was super fun. But I think for me, a lot of the times I think about my notebook and like wanting it to stand out a little bit. Like there's levels, right? Like we talked about just a few minutes ago where you go too far one way and you're like, whoa, that's a lot. And you're yelling at me and screaming at me. But yeah, I think it's like anything. It's like when people wear like a neon colored shirt, there's like a line where you're like, oh, that's neon. That looks really stylish. And then the other point where you're like, you're glowing in the dark, friend. I don't know if you know that or not.
All eyes on me. Just wrap it in Christmas lights kind of a thing. Really make it bright. But in terms of our next category of icks, what are we going to be chatting about?
We're going to talk about brand icks. And we don't have to name names, but we certainly can, I guess, if we want to spill the planner tea or not. But are there any things from a branding perspective? This could be from a creative perspective, Jess, like anything that you've come across within the stationery space and brand specifically that you're just like, no, that's not okay. That makes me feel kind of gross.
I think the biggest one would be, what was it called? Like user generated content, but used without permission. That one just, like we know we've had the blow up about it like previously in the past kind of a thing where brands have taken pictures that other people have created, like work that they've created in their journals, and used it in their marketing under the guise of like, oh hey, we're like giving you exposure, we're just like sharing your awesome ideas and such. And there's notably a line here, right? There's the we're sharing this because you tagged us in it and like we want to show this to our audience kind of a thing. And then there's, hey, we attached this to like a giveaway so that we can like gain following on our social media platforms and stuff like that. And it's definitely a gray area, but the easiest way to deal with this is just ask first. And sometimes it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that happens a lot, unfortunately. I don't know. I've seen a whole lot of it recently because I feel like the community really rallies around when that happens. Like when one of us hears that it happens to somebody else, we'll blow people up if we need to and just be like, absolutely not. And a lot of the times, too, is that'll happen. And then other people will go and search for it and be like, wait a second, what? The other day, I was actually watching The Greater Good. I was looking on her stories and she was talking about some of her videos. I guess she's using Meta or something to basically like capture like proof that it's hers. And it came up that like other companies, I think BuzzFeed, actually technically like on the internet web like owns one of her videos because they had posted a video, not shared it from her, but actually used one of her videos and shared it out. And so when she went to go like I do whatever, I forget exactly what she was doing, but now I feel like I need to do it. I need to watch that back, like basically prove ownership of it or whatever it is. It showed up and I was like, that is so uncool because back when that was happening, and I think it was a much older video too, though it was making a lot of money for people, that was doing a lot of clicks, right? That was getting them a lot of ad revenue. Like they were making out from it. And it's not always about the cost or like pay me for that. I think some creators would say, yes, pay me for that. But like you said, sometimes it's just asking permission or giving credit. That was the other thing too. She said, she's like, if I go to look at this post, there's no mention of my name anywhere. So there's no repercussion in like a positive way that's happening for me on this. It's absolutely 100% they created this content. And that's just incredibly uncool.
Yeah, it's almost like is this an ick or is this a rage kind of
Yeah.
a thing? Because just listening to someone just like, oh my god, where's my pitchfork? I'm going to go get him kind of a thing. Because yeah, it's not cool. I'm pretty sure it's some form of illegal plagiarism, copyright, something. Despite the fact that Vogel is in IP, I don't know a lot about it.
You're just like, look at this, Vogel. Is this infringing on anybody? Let me know.
Yeah, that's right. Do I need to take this to the High Commissioner kind of a thing? I don't even know. But it's just uncool, really. And it's also like, if if your brand is successful enough that you feel like, this is something you want to use, like user generated content and stuff like this, then just like give people incentives to make stuff that is going to be good to showcase your product in a way. I guess another one would be when certain brands in the past have used like user generated content in other people's planners and other people's notebooks to promote their own. And it's quite funny to see because it's just like I know that's not your notebook. So like, why is it on your website as like hey, images that like showcase our products? I'm like, that's not your product, bro.
It doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. I feel like people kind of grab it. Kind of goes with my ick a little bit. And this is maybe more for the creator space than for like the general. But when someone emails you or contacts you with like a generic thing, like I know when you've just pulled it off of my Instagram because it'll say mark your pages bullet journal enthusiast or whatever the hell my Instagram one says, something ridiculous. We love your content and we would love for you to blah blah blah. And I was just like, clearly this is generic. I hate when they send me ones that are like, hi, we're currently partnering with this big influencer. There's 5 million viewers and we're selling, tummy tea. Would you like? And I was like, why are you messaging me this? Like, clearly this has nothing to do with the content. You're just blasting stuff out there to whoever. Like, it's just such a waste of my time. It's a waste of their time. I just feel like if you're going to approach anyone, you don't have to write a personalized story about it, right? Like you can copy and paste. That also can go wrong when I think you got an email one time that was like, hi, Joe. You're like, not Joe. You pay a little bit of attention to it. If you're going to reach out to someone, it's okay to keep it relatively generic, but please don't just like copy and paste something and make sure that your name is at least correct. It's just one of those things. If you really wanted to work with me, you actually did look at my content, great. I'm not going to ask you to watch everything. I think one time you mentioned like someone was like, I loved your latest video. And you're like, you've only watched one video, clearly. That's not my most high performing one, but okay. So, just being generic about it, I just feel like I'm like, no, I don't want to work with you because obviously you don't have enough, gusto or inspiration or whatever just to be like, hey, Mark, and go from there.
Yeah, I think another one would probably be anytime that they want to compensate you with a free pack of pens and you're like, cool, I'm not going to make you like a dedicated video for a free pack of pens. I only have like 8-ish video slots per month and I'm not going to waste, because effectively it would be a waste of a video slot if you're just going to compensate me by giving me a free pack of pens that I could buy for like $6 kind of a thing. Some people will do it. that's fine. That is up to them. It's their prerogative. But I'm just like, I don't think that it would be fair on me. And I don't think it would be fair to my audience. Like, I value the team, I value their viewership kind of a thing. So I'm not going to like, I feel like that's where I feel like I would be a sellout. Like, I sold out for a $6 pack of pens. That's so sad.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I definitely have done that before. So I'm definitely guilty of it, especially early on when you're just starting off. We talked about that in our creator episode. You know, you're just like, oh, someone reached out to me. And you're like, okay, when I actually did the research for this and before I even knew what my time was worth necessarily or how much time that is going to take me to do, yeah, you're like $6 pack of pens for hours worth of content. You know, it's good exposure. No, exposure to, doesn't always buy me a sandwich to eat for lunch, my friends. So, but it's a hard one though. I definitely think that, you know, brands have certain budgets they work with, but you don't always have to offer money. It can always be other things, but be creative about it. I think, you know, the positive experiences I've had with brands are people who like very much respect what we do and they want to partner with you. They might not have a big budget. They might be just starting off, or in some cases, self-publishing. A few people have reached out to me over time that have self-published books or planners or things like that. I just find that I need to be a little bit more cautious on my side. I always want to say yes because I always feel bad for people. But then once I get it and I'm just like, this is less than coloring book paper. Like I can't even writing this with a pencil without it ripping through the page. Like I should have asked more questions.
Yeah, I think, yeah, obviously grains of salt with all of this because it's kind of like, you know, if somebody who's, you know, publishing their first thing and it's actually in fitting with our niches and stuff wants to like reach out and work with us, that is going to be a complete different kettle of fish to someone like insert name of big stationery brand here who's like, oh, hey, I want you to do like an unhaul video or stuff or whatever, and you can go buy things on our website and whatnot, and it needs to be at least 20 minutes long and you need to send it back for 3 edits and you need to make sure to include these links and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you've got a lot of requirements for me for giving me a bunch of dropship stationery. Like, yeah. I don't mind working with you, like, and I still do work with places that, you know, aren't necessarily compensating me with like, here is money along with like free product kind of a thing. But it's like the terms of that are going to be a little bit different compared to someone who's like, hey, I want to actually sponsor a video from you. We're going to pay you for this content. The final product is going to look quite different. And I think that it's when certain brands come to you and they're like, hey, we have this laundry list of expectations and we're going to give you like what is effectively like $20 worth of free product. I'm just like, nah, bro. First of all, I have so much bloody product. I don't really need any more. And second of all, it's just like, I have 8 video slots. I want to make sure that I'm using them as valuably as possible. And if what you're proposing doesn't provide the value that I see fit to provide to my audience, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, one of the other things that kind of goes a little hand in hand with this is when a brand has a product that they do send you, or even a brand that you purchase yourself, and then you get it and you paid a lot for it. So it's like a high price point, but for very low quality. I think specifically for me, I'll mention kind of 2 things. I won't mention the brands, but you know, notebooks that sell for $35, $40 or so that the paper just bleeds through, right? The pen, no matter what you're writing with, it ghosts a lot or it bleeds through. I know it's a little, you know, thin ice with like Hobonichis and the Tomorrow paper and all of that kind of stuff.
The Tomorrow paper is the best thing I have ever heard.
Wait, isn't it? Oh no, it's Tomoe, right?
Tomoe. No,
there
it's the Tomorrow paper. It shall forever forth be known. Starting tomorrow, it is known as the Tomorrow paper.
I used to call it Tomo River paper, and now it's Tomorrow. In my brain, the whole time before I said it, Jess, I was like, Mark, you know how to pronunciate this. You looked it up. You watched videos and phonetically looked how to spell this. Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. But anyway,
I love it so much. It's too good. But yes, the Tomoe River paper with the bleeding and ghosting that people seem to like.
It is what it is. But with some of the other paper, that's just not great, though. It's so hard because especially if you have, you know, volunteered or agreed to do something like that, then suddenly you're talking about a notebook that is not great. And there's been a number in my past where that has happened, where I was like, I love everything about this notebook. I love the brand. I love what they're doing. The designs are cool, all of this, but the paper is not it. And it's just really hard, especially when people will comment in the video and be like, this sounded really amazing. Why is that notebook $35 if you're telling me I can't write in it with like a regular gel pen? Like, it's hard for me to like say. And then kind of on the other side of that is like fountain pens just as a general area. This is so hard because I have some pretty expensive pens that I'm like, okay, I paid a lot of money for this. These are ones that people have given me. Like I've actually paid for it myself out of my pocket because everyone says that they're amazing. I'm not going to say the brand because people will find me and search me out and kill me. But there is a brand that everybody loves. They always like drool over. I bought one of the pens and it's probably one of my most unfavorite pens. Like nothing about it was really special. So I felt like it was all hyped up and people always talk about it and they're like, oh, I have to have this pen. Oh, look, this new design. And I was like, I actually just really don't like using that pen at all. And not that it's very expensive, but it's still one of those things where I'm like, it's not cheap. And I have a hard time sometimes, I will mention like Ferris Wheel Press is one of those that's kind of like right there on the line. Like, I just started checking out like some of their more expensive pens. And so I'm like, oh, it looks very beautiful. Like it's very nice. But like, this pen is $180 retail. And I'm just like, I mean, but is it that nice? Is it doing something different than the pens that I have that are 60 or $80 or half the price? And so you're trying to like justify in your brain, like what's special about it that it's worth paying that much money. And for me, and I don't say that like in a completely negative way because I am on their like ambassador Jubilee team, but I just like to be honest with the people that I'm working with. I do that with, Baron Fig as an example. Like I've talked with them specifically about some of my concerns with their planners and their papers, right? I like having those conversations with those. Like I know that the brands are interested, invested in making a good product, right? So I do feel like sometimes it's hard to kind of like justify the cost, especially if there's not like a very special feature that makes it okay.
Yeah, I do think that it is always just like disheartening, disappointing, and such when we pay a decent amount of money for a product and it just doesn't live up to the expectations you had for it. Something that's kind of in a similar vein with that is like I remember getting my first 160 GSM notebook and I was like, I know this is silly, but still, and I like I could rationalize through it and be like, that's not going to happen, but still, I was like, this is the notebook that makes me an artist. I'm going to be doing amazing artworks in here. I'm going to be whipping out my watercolors. I'm going to paint a picture kind of thing. Heck to the nah. And of course, getting onto the first page and like trying to do these things and stuff that's just like a type of creativity that I hadn't really dabbled in before and just feeling so disheartened that it's like, oh, everybody says this is the notebook that you can do this in and I can't get it to work. And I'm just like, yeah, but that's because you're still a learner and you haven't practiced the skill of painting. So of course you're not going to be good of it like right off the bat. But I don't deal well with that. If I'm not good at something instantly, it obviously wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, and like a totally non-planner one, but like I'll use my keyboard as an example, right? So this is the Nomad E I got. It's from Work Louder. I paid a lot of money for this, okay? Like a lot more than I've ever paid for a keyboard. I won't say it out loud. You can research if you want to. One of the switches on the key already broke. And it was when it happened, I had to switch it with a different key, but it was my space bar. So for 2 weeks before I realized, Mark, you can switch out a switch with a different key, I couldn't use this over $300 keyboard. And I was like, oh, this was a waste of my money. Like there's some really cool things about it. I really do like what it can do. But I was like, well, why am I spending all of this money? I could buy a clicky keyboard off of Amazon for $120, right? And work great. All the other keyboards I have work awesome, and they were significantly less than that. But it was one of those things. And luckily though, like their customer service was very good. So like they were very quick. They're like, we're sending you one out. We're so sorry. That's great. But imagine working with a company or buying something from a company that didn't have that customer service. And then you're just sitting here with like a expensive piece of plastic, essentially,
I had the same thing happen with my computer, which I recently purchased, like, within the last year or whatnot. I can't remember how much it was, like 3K New Zealand or something. So, like, I don't know. I can't do that kind of math in my head. 1,200 or something US? That math is poor. Don't out me. But the Bluetooth was busted. So, like, every time you guys see one of these episodes and I'm not wearing headphones, it's because my Bluetooth doesn't work and they can't connect.
It just doesn't make any sense. It's just like I paid you extra for that. Like it should work extra better because I paid more. Or I mean, honestly, Bluetooth isn't even extra anymore, you know?
Yeah, exactly. This should just be a default, like, baseline. Does the computer work? Does the Bluetooth work? Like, that is on the line it's at, but it's fine. It's not fine. It's very frustrating. I ended up going and buying a Bluetooth dongle, which was like $30 or something, because I'm just like, no, I'm not unplugging my computer in full to take it down to your dang shop for you to say there's nothing wrong with it, and then me coming home with the same flippant issue. But anyway, what's our next category, Mark?
Well, let's talk about functionality, Ix. Is there anything functionally within your planner notebooks that you're just like, I don't like you. No, thank you.
Anytime that like a notebook doesn't have an elastic closure, because I see an elastic closure as a functional item. Like even though I work at home and I don't really take my notebooks out of the house or anything like that, I just want to be able to close it and know that if I put it in a bag, it's not just going to like spray open and like leak pages out of it. I don't think that would happen for most of my notebooks anyway, but like I still worry about it.
It's so funny. I think so often like how our brains go to like similar things. Like it maybe these are just common things we have. Because I was gonna say my biggest is when the page holder falls out of the notebook. I don't know why, but the only notebooks that has happened to me on are our journal of notebooks. Now that could just be because I've used a lot more of them versus other brands. Therefore, it's going to, from a ratio perspective, happen more. But it really grinds my gears when it when it happens, because it's kind of the thing we just talked about. These notebooks are not inexpensive. You're still paying $35-$40 or so for them. Double up on the super glue or whatever it might be. I mean, it's not like I'm walking around like whipping my notebook around by the page holders, but like there's no reason that they should just be like falling out.
No, I completely agree. And of course, it's the one notebook where the page marker is actually important that they both fell out of. The first one that fell out was the one with the ampersand, because I was sitting on the couch, went to cross my legs, it got caught under my boot and ripped out. I'm like, okay, that was a me problem. But then the next one fell out. I'm like, escandalo. So now I have to use the elastic closure as the bookmark because I need to be able to find my page. This is one of those few journals where I actually care what page I'm on.
Don't you have any of I mean, Archer and Olive had them. Maybe you didn't buy any of them, but like the metal page holders or anything from any of the sub boxes? Like, do you have any of those so you could functionally use your elastic band to keep it closed, but just use a page marker for your page?
To bend my page like that, sacrilege. Oh my god, I might as well just dog ear the notebook at this stage. Oh my lord.
I said it and I was like, well, not some of them, because they like eat into the top of your page when you use it. Maybe a gentle page holder,
Yeah. I do have one of those like the magnetic this what's it, a magnetic bookmark that kind of folds over and you put it on the edge of the page and it like magnetizes to itself so it stays there. I don't think to use that. So this one, so many words. This guy lives beside my bed anyway, so it's not really like he's going anywhere. So I can use the elastic closure. It's not the end of the world. But staying on the theme of bookmarks, when a journal or planner has a bookmark that isn't long enough to stick out the bottom of the page, it has only happened to me once, but I was like, who in the actual ever-loving heck thought that this was like a finished product? Who thought like, yeah, you know what? That's perfect. That's exactly what people are going to need from their bookmarks.
Were all of them like that, or did you just get like a dud?
I don't know. I hope that it was just mine that was a dud, but I don't have enough there's not enough people sharing theirs online for me to really see if it was like a common thing. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it was a while ago, so I might be completely off base here. I feel like I would have at the stage gone and done some research and just found that that was the way it was designed. And I don't know why someone would think that that would work, because at least the way that I use the bookmarks, and maybe this is why they keep falling out, but I always pull from the bottom. It's like, it feeds through, sits on the page, sits at the bottom, and then I like pull it to the side to like lever up the notebook to open to that page.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, the right way to do it, right? But you can't do that with that notebook because it's not long enough. It sits on the page, like it finishes on the page, not out the other side of the journal.
Gotcha. So then you're just like fingering through the page to like find it and like little C and be like, oh, there's my page. Like I could have just did that without this bookmark. You made it harder actually for me.
Yeah, exactly. Completely unnecessary. So yeah, just when like the functional pieces of the notebook don't work or aren't designed in the way to allow them to work with the most common way that people will use them.
Mm.
That's the only example I can think of, but there are probably other examples out there and I'm not for it.
It's totally okay. I mean, my next ick is when I'm using any type of planner that has the boxes or spaces that are too small to actually do anything in. I just feel like if this is a journal, this is a planner, the purpose here is to write inside of it. So sometimes it has to do with like the line spacing between the lines if it's a lined piece. Sometimes it's just the amount of space it gives you. I am not a huge like weekend journaler, so I usually don't leave a lot of space or really use any space at all for like a Saturday, Sunday. But I know a lot of people though on the other side of the space that are just like, no, like it is the same importance as every other day during the week. Why are you giving me less space? I think a lot the Ugmonk calendars do that, where it's like Saturday, Sunday are these little tiny pieces down here. Works for me. It's why I love it so much. But I think some people would be like, what's the difference between your Monday through Friday and your weekends, my friend? Like, treat everyone equally here.
Yeah, that's right. Give them their fair share. I am one of those people who would prefer every day of the week got the same amount of space because I pick my own schedule. Oftentimes I do work on the weekends and such. So if I was going to have one kind of like a structure that had any of the days have less space, it would be Thursday because Thursday is energy slump day. And regardless of what my task list looks like, I'm not going to get a lot done. But the one that kind of irritates me in terms of like a weekly structure in particular is when they won't just like stay in a lane. So you have like either a vertical layout or a horizontal layout, but then we have some planners out there who are trying to do both. And I'm like, no, stop it. I just want it to, personally, I just want it to be vertical because my task lists are long and I like to write them down a page. But when you have them that's like set up, so we have, vertical sections for the week, like work week days, quote, quote, work week, and then the weekends on the bottom of the page. I'm just like, no, I'm not going to just like change up the way that I do lists just because you've decided that these boxes need to be horizontal. That's hideous.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. I'll just kind of add a little tab on here, is especially as a lefty, is when you're working inside of a planner that has like really thick binding on it as well, and you already don't have enough space to write, and then you've got to like indent all of your words because it's got that on there. So it's a lefty thing for sure, but it's still one of those things where I'm just like, if you're only going to give me like an inch and a half to write in, can you maybe just bump everything over a little bit so that I can have space? Like, don't forget lefties are people too.
Lefties are people too. Lefties have souls.
I know.
Another one that gets me though is when you have like a pre-structured calendar and pre-structured weeklies and they start on different days of the week. I'm like, I don't like a Sunday start, but I would prefer a Sunday rather than a Sunday and Monday. Like, don't do both. Just pick one of them.
Oh my gosh, that would be terribly confusing. I had a really hard time last year. I did Monday starts in my bullet journal. So like I personally decided to do that inside of there. So it was really my fault. But that confused me so much because I'm used to Sunday starts just on normal calendars or work calendars and stuff like that too. But I can't even imagine why anyone would switch that. Of all things to change, why are you changing the day of the week? Like I feel like that messes with like the calendar dates. Like there has to be mistakes and repetition that accidentally happen if you do that. That doesn't make any sense.
It's weird though, eh? It seems to be a common thing though, and I genuinely don't understand why. Because I personally prefer Monday for both. Like, before I bullet journaled, I was a Sunday start person because I had grown up with like, this is the Sunday start wall calendar. Like, that's the way that things work. That's the way it is. And then as soon as I started bullet journaling, I guess that the first person I got inspiration from was doing Monday start weeklies. I'm like, okay, well, everything starts on a Monday now. That's fine. But like you said, the number of like muck-ups that I would make if I had to use both, because I'd be like, okay, cool, start of the week, Sunday, yep, writing down my things. And then I go to the weekly, start writing down the same things, be like, oh, it actually belongs on the last page over here in this last box rather than the first box of this layout. And just, so I don't get it.
That's a hard thing to kind of go through. I mean, my last one for this section for me, I would say, again, comes from like predated planners. And it's about like the thoughtfulness and functionality of how a planner works. I'm not saying that not everyone well, I guess the idea is like not everyone uses planners the same way. I think that's why a lot of people customize their planners because a lot of them do kind of force you into a specific way of working. And I think that's mostly because like that's their method, right? That's what they're kind of coming up with and like saying that's how it works. But I think it's just problematic when you're really forced into something And just from a general usability, like it doesn't flow very well, or you're consistently always covering up parts of a notebook. Like that to me is just bad design. That's just somebody has decided, like, I'm just going to vomit up all these little boxes onto a page and just see what happens versus like actual, like, user testing that, right? Handing that to a friend or saying, hey, use this for a week. Like if I was going to design my own planner, that's how I would go about it. I would think about, how is this going to be used? Who is my audience for doing this? And I'm not saying that every single brand doesn't do this or every notebook doesn't. There are some that are very specific, but I think it's maybe more on that like less expensive end. And I'm not fully well versed in like these types of planners necessarily because I've never purchased an expensive pre-made planner. Most of them have been on the less expensive side for me to like try them out. And maybe that's why I'm experiencing this in that way, because it's just a bulk mess that they're kind of shoving out there. Just like it says 2025 planner on it and everyone needs a new one in December. So like, let's just put out a bunch of these in different designs. But then you actually crack into it. You're just like, this doesn't make sense to me. Like, why is there a tracker in the middle of the week? Like this needs its own space. This isn't right.
Yeah, this is kind of like this big grains of salt here. Let me finish before you get angry at me, people. Okay, this idea of like pretty versus functional, which anyway, but pretty versus functional, and where we're making planners or products or stuff for planner people that are more pretty than they are functional. And I'm like, they're not opposites. You can have both. Like, can we just make it pretty and functional? Like, for instance, if you're going to release a notebook and a pen, why can't they work together? Like, why can't we have it so that your pen that you have designed that looks nice also works on the planner that you have designed that looks nice? If I pick up your pen and your planner and I try to use them together, I don't want it to bleed through like 6 pages. Please think about these kind of things. Yes, sure, they look nice. They're pretty. Love that for you. But let's make them functional together as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll get myself in trouble if I talk too much about that one.
Oh, don't worry. I know exactly who I'm talking about.
You just look back at my videos and you'll find out who we're speaking of.
But Planner Pals, we would love to hear, what are your planner icks? What are the things that give you the heebie-jeebies, the things that make you cringe, that turn you off? Either let us know in the comments, or you can email us at plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on Instagram at plannerpalspodcast.
On our next episode, Planner Pals, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, planner hacks. But little curveball for you is going to be ones that we've heard about that do work, or maybe we thought they were going to, but it's really not the best practice for those. So we'll talk about the do's and don'ts of the planner hack world. It's going to be a super fun one, Jess, because I've got a bunch that I love talking about them. So I can't wait to bring them up. And ones that I've tried out too that just, they're no good.
No, I'm excited to possibly find some new techniques and then maybe put a couple to bed that just aren't going to work in the long run. But for today, Planner Pals, thanks for watching.